Resuming debate, l'honorable deputy.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'm going to use this time in order to be able to clear up a few points that some of my Conservative colleagues have not understood after several hours of debate. We're here today to vote on a bill that requires workers to abandon their right to bargaining. It's imposing on these workers security and work conditions that are outdated, and it is making workers remain silent. This back-to-work legislation is a step backwards for the rights of workers. We've said this many times in this House, Mr. Speaker, but apparently this point has not been understood on the other side of this House. Under this bill, workers will lose their rights that took decades to win, and that is the right to collective bargaining. Listen to that word, negotiation, bargaining. This is a word that the government and the leader of the government needs to look at more closely. You have to be able to discuss and debate between two parties to be able to reach an agreement that is fair for both. Even if one of the parties has more power, even if it has a majority, democracy and justice dictate that that party listen to what others have to say and to learn from their experience. This government quite obviously does not believe in that word, negotiation. For several months now, postal workers have tried to negotiate better working conditions. They've made concessions, and they've accepted to listen to what management wanted to tell them. They were willing to accept a collective agreement that was already in effect. They were willing to do this in order to be able to move forwards. They have shown more loyalty to their work and more loyalty to our constituents than what their legal obligations required them to do. Now, what is the government doing with their concessions? What is the government doing with this loyalty to public services? Well, it's just showing contempt. It's ignoring them, denying them their rights, and worse, it is removing what has been gained so far. It's proposing lesser wages and worse working conditions. Why? Why are they imposing on workers working conditions that are worse than those that have been accepted by Canada Post itself? Let's go back to the argument that Canada Post has used. And it is said that it is not financially viable enough in order to be able to accept those demands. Mr. Speaker, one can only suppose that there was no threat here. So there was no threat to Canadian funds or to Canadian finances or to the finances of Canada Post. The government, even though there was no threat to Canada Post, decided to go back on those proposals. Why? The answer is simple: profit. Under this bill, security, safety, and the quality of life of devoted workers is being traded for profit. More profit than the $281 million in benefits that Canada Post made last year. More millions of dollars simply for the dignity of our workers. Is that what the Prime Minister calls higher interests of this country? Perhaps he has forgotten that this country is not a bank, no more than this country is a billfold. It's made up of people, Mr. Speaker, people who work and who are devoted to this country. These are people who have already made enough concessions.
And what concessions have the government made? Where is the dignity of this government? I really don't know. I don't see it in this bill. What I see is an insult for all workers in this country who get up every morning to make sure the country is operating well, to deliver the mail so that patients can be looked after and goods can be manufactured and our children can go to school. The truth, Mr. Speaker, is that workers are showing more respect and concern for Canadians than the government is. This lack of respect shown towards postal workers is totally unacceptable. Who will be the next? Who will be sacrificed in the name of the superior interests of the economy, so-called? Who will have to remain silent, confronted by these so-called economic interests? I have received an email
not only for postal workers, but for all workers who don't have a voice. J'aimerais ne pas répéter pour une fois.
I don't want to have to repeat once again what the government is doing, but there's no choice. They authorized a lockout of employees. They prevented workers from carrying out their work. As well, they are now proposing an act to force workers back to work, and their rights are being removed in this bill. The right to collective bargaining, to work in a safe environment, to have well-funded retirement, to have a dignified old age. From the very beginning of this debate yesterday, my NDP colleagues and I have been receiving emails, encouragement and thanks from our fellow citizens. And I would like to take this opportunity to thank all these people for their support. They remind us why we are here, why we are standing and speaking in this House, and why we are ready to stay as long as it is necessary. We have heard numerous times from the Conservatives that Canadians have given them a clear mandate as a justification for the way they are behaving in this House, but I think that they are wrong. I don't see this as a clear message. It was only 30% of Canadians who voted for the Conservatives. The clear message which I see is that some 62% of citizens voted against this government. This morning, one of my emails read, "I'm very proud to have supported the NDP. It warms my heart to see you in the House defending principles which are dear to me, such as the right to free collective bargaining, equal pay for equal work, decent pension plans, and public services for the population as a whole, and the fact that you are fighting against unfair attacks against the working class.
To not be bullied by Canada Post and the government into a vindictive and unfair contract. Thank you for standing up for our right under the law to free bargaining. A note, keep on speaking out, keep up the fight, keep making it clear how the crisis is one which has been manufactured by the Conservative government. Manufactured by the government. Notez bien ces mots, monsieur.
So these words should be noted, Mr. Speaker. We have heard from many Conservative members talking about the strike, but there seems to be a lack of understanding here. As we have already said here, that this lockout was not chosen by postal workers. It was chosen by the management of Canada Post under the authority of the government. So this is a lockout, and it shows a lack of will to deal with this situation responsibly. Mr. Speaker, Conservatives have repeated their concerns for small businesses. Well, we are all concerned about small businesses here in this House, but it is important that there should be mail service, but nobody asked for a lockout, and the government's reactions. Why was there a lockout? Who chose this lockout? Who is really responsible for damaging small businesses? Who's affecting the economy of our country? It's our Right Honourable Prime Minister who is harming small businesses, who is doing damage to the economy of this country, and he is not doing anything to improve the situation in this country.
Question commentaire. The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary to the Minister of Public Safety.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, we know that close to 70% of Canadians support this legislation. They support seeing Canada Post back to work. They support getting their mail delivered. My question for the member opposite, it was only a few short months ago that we saw the Liberal Party of Canada totally ignore and remain out of touch with Canadians, and we saw what happened to them. It's a shame to see the NDP so quickly turn their backs on what Canadians want, refuse to be in touch with Canadians, and instead follow their own left-wing ideology. So I ask the member opposite, when will you look at what Canadians want, put aside your political rhetoric and what your union bosses are asking for, and go and actually work for Canadians? That's my question.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, I know that many people would like to be getting their mail delivered, but why is the member asking, why is she not asking her leader to do away with the lockout so that mail can continue to be delivered?
It's the Honourable Member for Guelph.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. Mr. Speaker, I've never been a part of a union, but in my past life I've negotiated plenty of collective agreements, usually acting on behalf of management. We always entered those negotiations with the goodwill, with the intention of there being a win-win scenario at the end, realizing that good faith had to be maintained between the parties because you had to live together and work together afterwards. And I'm wondering, Mr. Speaker, through you, if there's value in letting the workers go back to work, enter into regular mediation, arbitration, negotiations, and whether that kind of relationship, that good relationship, is retrievable or not, or as opposed to forcing this draconian legislation on CUPW right now.
The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, indeed, it would be much more acceptable to do away with the lockout. This would also be better for the working environment. So if the lockout is done away with and people can go back to work, I think there will be a better atmosphere in Canada Post. Honourable Member for Pontiac. Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I would like to ask my colleague what the link is between one group of workers carrying out negotiations and earn benefits and the rest of the Canadian population. The Honourable Member for Abitibi-Témiscamingue. Mr. Speaker, what I would like to emphasize here is that this bill is of very great importance. We're discussing the future of postal workers in Canada, but this really relates to all workers in Canada. If one group can see their rights removed, we are opening the door to the governments being able to impose working conditions. So we must preserve the right to negotiate of all Canadians, not just postal workers.
The Honourable Minister of State for Western Economic Diversification.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. I'd like to ask the member if she has any local insurance offices, small business, the type that the NDP campaign that they represented. On my Blackstrap member, a concerned constituent wrote me today saying that we look out for all types of people, seniors, farmers, students, families, small business, churches. We rely on Canada Post to send our clients their insurance policies and other necessary communications. For many younger individuals and urban families, we cannot send any correspondence by email. However, for those such seniors, farmers, rural businesses, and rural families, they do not have the luxury. These individuals rely on communications sent through the mail via Canada Post. These seniors and rural individuals are now without the documents that would confirm that their interests are protected or are without notice of potential risks that they should be aware of. Does the member have such small businesses that they who claim to be representing? I'd be interested to know.
The honourable member for Abitibi-Temiskaming. Well, yes, of course, Mr. Speaker. There are small businesses in my riding which are affected by the situation, and this is why I feel that the Conservative members should ask their leader to do away with the lockout so that postal workers can go back to work and deliver mail and get back to negotiating.
A reprise le débat. Là, la députée